Welcome to the Smarter Money Life podcast powered by Forum Credit Union, your go-to podcast for all things personal finance, where we break down complex financial concepts into simple, actionable steps. Whether you're looking to save more, invest wisely, or plan for your future, we've got you covered. Join us each episode as we bring you expert insights, real-life stories, and practical tips to help you live a smarter money life. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Smarter Money Life. I'm your host, Andy Mattingly, and today we're going to talk about how to evaluate job offers and navigate the entire process of starting your career. Now, I wanted to bring in someone that has a lot more knowledge on this than I do. So joining me today is a human resource industry veteran who's worked for several global organizations and who is currently an executive coach mentor at Butler University, Randy Brown. Randy, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure our audience is going to love all the insights that you're going to bring to the table.
Hey, Andy, it's really good to be here with you.
Well, we're going to jump right in. So, one of the things that some, especially college kids don't think about is they're going to have a lot of different multiple job offers to look at. So how would you tell them the things that they need to do to look at all these different offers?
Well, I think the first thing to remember is this is all brand new to them, right? It's very exciting and uncharted territory. So I encourage them to kind of prepare for the offer in advance by thinking about what matters to them. And I suggest four basic criteria to think about. The first would be the work itself. What kind of work energizes you and engages you? The second, it's a big one that they often forget, but it could be one of the most important ones, is culture. And I define culture as the way things are done around there. And that includes things like how people are treated day in and day out, the management style, the freedom to act, the flexibility. It's not just the ping pong tables, right? It's really much more about how you as an employee are valued, treated, and developed. The third one is location, and sometimes that goes to the top of the list. If you have a person who's got a significant other in their life, and they're trying to figure out where both people start their career, location can become a very important criteria that kind of goes to the top of the list. And the last one, and usually in priority order, I think it should be the last one, is comp and benefits. You want to get that right, but if the work and the culture aren't right, the pay and benefits will kind of go into the background and not be as important.
Yeah, because that only makes you happy every payday. And the rest of the week you're miserable, right? Or the rest of the 2 weeks. Yeah, that's really good. So you talk about company culture. How do you suggest for people to figure out the company culture and all of those things?
Talk to people who work there. Talk to people who know people who work there. When you're interviewing, watch how people behave. When it's time for you to ask questions about culture. Ask the hiring manager, why do you like working here? What kind of people do well here? Probe a little bit for those things that you can't really read about online. It's really important. And of course, read the stuff that's available online. There are sources that, people can check out to see what the culture is like somewhere. But those can be deceiving. I think the best thing to do is see for yourself, check things out, and do your homework by talking to people.
Yeah, that's good. One of the things I try to tell everyone I interview is that, hey, you should be interviewing us just as much. And I should be just as nervous as you are, because if we want you, I've got to make a good impression, right?
Right. I mean, all their lives, young people have been trying to prove themselves, for the next level of something. And suddenly they're now about to enter the real world. And they discover as they interview and get close to maybe a job offer, they have something they've never had before called choice and leverage. Right?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And so it's really important you know that, and that you make sure that you don't just jump at the first thing, that you really think hard. Having that criteria list up front, ranked, weighted even, about what matters to you, can really help you analytically consider an offer.
Yeah, that makes sense. The other thing you talked a little bit about was researching. And so why is it kind of important to research a company's reputation and financial stability? Because there's, mature companies and there's startups. And so how should someone put all of that together?
I think, if you get the greatest job in the world for a company who's going to go out of business in 6 months, it's no good, right? It's a false plus. But there are different sizes of companies. There are different pluses and minuses to go with scale and size. You work for a great large company, you can get promoted in advance and never have to change companies, right? It can be wonderful. And maybe you like playing in the big leagues with some of the leading players. On the other hand, there's mid-sized companies that are very engaging, kind of the best of both, and small startups that sometimes have a high level of risk, but you get to see and be involved very directly with the top people and how things are done. So I think it's important to assess financial stability, assess your own risk tolerance, and go into that environment that is going to be most engaging to you. Careers are long, and people think that the first company they work for is a company they're likely to work for a long time. Maybe that was sort of true with you and me, not so much anymore.
Yeah, that's true. And, you make a good point about startups. A lot of times you could be the first 10 employees or whatever, and you're going to get a lot more exposure than going to work for a Fortune 100 company where you have your little area and you don't know anything else about the rest of the business. And it's always not where you start, it's where you want to end up. So that's a good point about balancing the risk and rewards there.
I've had students who've gone to startups and it's worked out well for 2 years. They've learned a ton. And then, the company didn't take off the way they'd hoped. They move on, but they take that learning with them. And all of them have said, boy, I wouldn't trade that for something that was maybe more stable. I learned a lot and I'm going to use it. So the most important thing, I think, in the first 3 years of work is growth, expansion, learning, so that instead of when you're 25, having been somewhere for 3 years, you now are a more highly skilled, broader person, and you're more marketable to someone else too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You talked about kind of having a personal scorecard to evaluate offers. So what are some of the things that or how would you tell someone, here's how you can evaluate job offers to build your own unique scorecard? Because it's going to probably be different. You touched on some of that. So can you kind of expand upon that?
Sure. So for example, if you stick with those 4 basic criteria, let's say you have the work itself, the culture, the location, and the compensation. And let's pull location out for a second, because maybe that doesn't matter to you at all, right? You're willing to go anywhere. You just graduated, and anywhere in the U.S. works for you. So, kind of look at the other 3 and say, well, what is it about the work? Have work as a category, but what do you mean? What type of work do you want to do? Kind of literally write down what work engages you, how much flexibility you want. Go to the culture and ask yourself, what kind of advancement opportunities do I want? What kind of flexibility do I want? Kind of be more specific inside those buckets. And then even when you get to pay and benefits, I would say for a young person, base pay is always important. Thinking about health coverage, whether you're going to get it through your parents until you're 26 or buy it on your own. But I think the other benefits that tend to be most important to younger people are things like 401k, the match, will you be able to start saving? Sometimes there will be a loan repayment benefit, although that's kind of an obscure and not so prevalent benefit. But things like tuition reimbursement. Let's say you want to go to grad school and have the company pay for part of that. Understanding there's a phrase that's about 30% of your total pay package is in the hidden paycheck, the benefits that you don't obviously see. A bonus plan, profit sharing plan. So I think if you can take those categories, we talked about the big ones, and bucket them into more specific things, then you can kind of objectively evaluate an offer when it comes in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because I do think people forget about some of the other benefits that go with it. I mean, you talk about 401k, but it's like some companies provide life insurance, which is good to have. If you have a significant other and you're thinking that, in 3 to 5 years, I may start a family, then what's the maternity leave, paternity leave, having short-term disability, you slip and fall and you can't work for 2 weeks. You want to know that those things are covered. So I think that's, that those are the kind of benefits that you're mentioning there, that you need to, once you're down evaluating, you really need to look at those.
Right. Absolutely.
They make it. I mean, I even know that some people have talked about when they work in a bigger city, but not a city where there's public transportation, is parking paid.
Right.
It makes a difference on when you're looking at compensation, saying, well, how much am I going to pay a month to park down here? Maybe I take the lower compensation because the parking makes it up. So I think it's all those little things. I think those are good points to look at.
And even when you factor in geography, we're here in Indianapolis. I have about 20% of Butler students are from the greater Chicago area. The ones who want to go home, I tell them, consider adding about $10K in base salary if you're going to go back home versus a salary you would have in Indianapolis. It's not to discourage them from going back home. It's just to help them understand the reality of what it may cost to live in Chicago.
Yes. Yes. Well, it's kind of like what we're talking about in with people with helping with financial matters. It doesn't matter how much you make; it's how much you spend that really changes your financial life, right? And living in a different place is going to cost you more just to spend for basic necessities. So, yeah, that's good.
And I don't want to minimize. I'm emphasizing work and culture. Those are the ones we know matter the most.
Yeah.
But there are kids who are graduating with student loan debt. And
yes.
It matters that they get the company. It will also make you unhappy if the pay isn't fair and competitive.
Yes.
So you got to know the market. You got to know what your value is. There are resources where you can find that out. And so that way you can evaluate an offer versus the market, not just your own criteria.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we've talked a lot about these different things, but what happens if the company you really want to work for doesn't give you the best offer, but you want to figure out, well, how can I negotiate a better offer?
There's some really good methods for that. There's one in particular, I think, for fresh grads that works. And if it's okay with you, can I tell a story that's kind of close to home?
Yes, that's perfectly fine.
Okay, well, Andy here has 3 wonderful children, and they're all grown. Youngest is Luke, and I was fortunate enough to get to work with Luke when he was graduating to help him figure out his launch plan, and what a joy that was. I happened to be Luke's godparent as well, so it was great fun. So we were working on his plan, and Luke had a strategy. He knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to be in a particular industry, and he wanted it to have a focus on the agricultural community too. So he knew what he wanted. He went out and he searched, and the first offer he got came in, and he was excited because he really liked his employer, but the offer was a little disappointing. So the strategy that he employed and that worked for him was he went back to the employer and said, "Hey, I'm really grateful. I appreciate this offer. I'm very interested in potentially working here. The thing is, I'd love to complete what I've already started and what I've already put in motion, just to make sure that when I make the decision to say yes, that I'm fully there, right?" And he said, "I don't want to talk to people I haven't already talked to. I just want to finish what I've started." And his employer found that to be very reasonable, right? And they said, "Makes sense. How long do you think you need?" He asked for 3 weeks, and he went out and he got 3 more offers. He finished interviewing those 3 other companies. And now here he is, he has 4 offers. Well, the one he really wants is not the highest paying one. So he went back to that original company, and he basically said, "Thank you for the time. I really would love to work here. I found that I have one offer that is X," and he shared with them what that was. And he said to them, "By the way, I will work here. I will accept this job if you can match that compensation, and I appreciate the consideration." And he didn't box himself into a corner. He didn't say what he wouldn't do or would do. He just basically said, "If you match this, you got my yes right away." He didn't make the employer feel like they were jumping through hoops or he was playing one against the other. He went back to the one he wanted and said, "Here's what I'd like, and here's what I found." And interesting story, they not only matched it, but they gave him a little more. And they complimented him for the very professional way in which he did it. So the bottom line in that whole story is, bravo, Luke, right? It takes it takes some nerve, right?
Exactly.
It takes some 3 weeks of sweating, but spread the wealth. Go after more than one company. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. The fact that he had 4 offers gave him an opportunity to negotiate with the employer he really wanted most. He went back, and don't be afraid to ask for what you want. I think that's the other point. If you come back, you're reasonable, you're professional about it. Not every employer is going to say yes to that, but many will appreciate the way you handled it. And if you don't ask, you'll never know.
Exactly. And I think, your point was that he didn't box them in, right? He said, "This, if you can match this, I'll say yes right now and we're done. Otherwise, I'm going to keep evaluating."
We even practice, like, what if they say, "What will you do if we don't match it?" And my coaching to him was, your answer is, "Well, then I'll have a tougher decision."
Yeah. So you never really gave what the final decision was going to be. So Yeah, I will testify that that is an approach that was difficult for him to do, because here's a graduating college senior, and you're dealing with people that are in their 40s that have worked there for 15 or 20 years.
Right.
But I think, to your point, one is that he didn't just focus in on one company. And I know a lot of kids, when they graduate, they want to work at one company and they focus all their effort on that. Then they get an offer that's lower. They can't say anything else, or they don't get an offer and then they start over, instead of saying, hey, put yourself out there and go to as many interviews and as many follow-ups and, get to people, because then you have some negotiating power.
And I think that is a key point, is it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to give yourself that leverage, right? He had to go to a lot of interviews and convince a lot of people that he was their guy. But he did. And the other thing was, you have to be good. You have to have a track record. You have to have achieved something. You have to be able to tell your story, interview, and win offers. So if you do all those things, you can create options for yourself. And that's the whole point.
Yeah, exactly. And, I know you work with your students at Butler on this. It's so important to have good internships.
Oh, yeah.
That just really helps. And especially if it's and I know that, like, when you're a sophomore, maybe you're not sure what you want to do. But when you get to those last couple of internships that you have, one, it helps you make sure you really want to do that. But then a company says, oh, well, yeah, you've kind of done this already.
Yeah, at the Butler Business School, we actually require our undergrads to have 2 internships. And they're 4-credit internships. They have to do academic work as well while they're doing the internship. And they don't graduate unless they do
that.
And then we don't let them do the second one at the same place.
Yeah.
And the whole point of an internship is try things on. See what you like. Do something different the second time around, just to make sure. But there's 2 things about the internships. One is it helps you learn experientially what you like and what you don't. Size, company culture, all those things. You can think about it in your room, but until you try things on, you don't know. And the other thing is it builds your resume. It gives you something that an employer can look at and that you can talk about. I never underestimate working at McDonald's, nannying, all those things. But when you get into college and you have at least one professional kind of internship, it sets you apart.
Yes, it definitely does. Is there anything else you want to share that we haven't talked about? I mean, you've covered a lot, and I really appreciate your time today, because this is very valuable information for people that are in this. And I would say, even if it's not your first job you're going for, but even if you've been in a job for a couple of years and you're like, okay, I'm ready to move on, all of this still applies.
Yeah, it does. And I would say, especially, the fun of working with college kids is there's so much ahead of them. And the biggest thing is back to something I alluded to earlier. All you want to do when you graduate is launch well, right?
Yeah.
Launch well into a role that you look forward to going in, enjoying every day, that you're learning and growing. And then as you get older, you'll build on that, and you'll find out, you'll know more what else is out there, and you'll pivot. Your careers are very long. You can't try and predict what you're going to do when you're 35, when you're 25. You got to let life happen, but don't just sort of let it happen to you. Make it happen by going out, learning, exploring, expanding yourself, and all kinds of good things can happen.
Yeah, that's great stuff. Well, as we wrap up today's episode on navigating job offers as a college graduate and beyond, remember, choosing the right job is about more than just the salary. And I think we've talked a lot about that today. So, you want to consider things like workplace perks, corporate culture, career growth opportunities, which we touched on a little bit, and the work-life balance. That's all for this episode of the Smarter Money Life podcast. Thank you for joining me. I hope you found our discussion helpful and inspiring. You can find more resources on the Smarter Money Life page at forumcu.com. Remember, making smart financial decisions is a journey, and every step you take brings you closer to your financial dream. Be sure to tune in next time for more tips and insights on managing your money. Until then, stay smart and financially savvy.